The Fourth Champion Part 1. He blinked. He blinked again. He tried for a third time, but nothing changed. It was like some strange dream. He tried to make a fist, and drive his fingernails into his palm. The stinging pain he felt made him confident that it was no vision or dream. Yet, the still smouldering piece of parchment was proof to the contrary. Albus Percival Wulfric Brian Dumbledore lifted his eyes from the smouldering parchment and looked around the great hall to all the students who sat silently, waiting to hear the name on the last piece of parchment that had been shot out by the flaming goblet. The silence was so heavy, the Hogwarts headmaster could feel it on his shoulders, pressing them down. Never in his over 120 years could he have ever imagined this exact situation. As he stared at the neat scrawl on the singed parchment in his weathered old hand. Harry Potter. Staring disbelievingly at the burnt scrap in his hand, the old man felt his chest constrict tightly. It just wasn't possible, and yet, he had the proof in his very hand. Someone else knew that the boy was alive. All of his work and plans, and they were for nothing. Someone knew the boy was alive, and they seemed determined to bring him out of hiding. Harry Potter had been entered into the Triwizard Tournament. Albus Dumbledore, headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, was completely flummoxed as to how young Harry's name got into the Goblet of Fire, which had been tasked with selecting the very best candidates to participate in the tournament. Dumbledore was quite proud when Cedric Diggory's name had emerged from the goblet. Diggory was a very popular 17-year-old Hufflepuff, and would have been captain of his house Quidditch team that year, had not the tournament taken precedent. But then young Harry's name had emerged after the other school champions had been selected. This was very bizarre, especially considering that Harry Potter did not attend Hogwarts. In fact, as far as most of the world was concerned, Harry Potter had not survived that fateful night 13 years ago. Dumbledore, remembering that everyone was watching him, clutched the scrap of parchment into his hand and led the others responsible for the Triwizard Tournament into a small room just off of the Great Hall where the three champions now waited for their instruction. Once everyone was locked inside the small room, glittering with shining trophies from past Hogwarts students, Dumbledore turned to face the other judges, and the two ministry officials, Barty Crouch and Ludo Bagman. "What does it say, Dumbledore?" Igor Karkaroff asked, looking quite irritable. "It appears that someone has tried to pull some kind of prank." Dumbledore spoke calmly. "A fourth champion has been selected." "A fourth? How is this possible?" Madame Maxime, the head of the French wizarding school, Beaux Batons, asked, looking down on them all, as she was easily several feet taller than them all. Her young charge, and champion for her school, Fleur Delacour, looked very confused as she came to her headmistress' side. "There are only 3 schools competing. Unless of course your ministry has failed to inform us of a 4th school. No other schools were contacted about participating, I assure you." "Madame Maxime." Ludo Bagman flashed what he felt was one of his most charming smiles. The impossibly tall French headmistress merely gave a nod that she'd heard him. "I am unsure. Though I theorize that the name was put under a 4th school, how else could it be chosen? What is more upsetting is the fact that this person is under the age set under the new rules. He is only 14. Dumbledore said, looking imploringly at Crouch, who was in charge of the entire tournament. Crouch, an tired-looking man with a pencil-thin mustache and basset hound eyes, began shaking his head. "This is most disturbing," he said as he began to pace. "The Goblet of Fire represents a binding magical contract. Even if someone else submitted the name, this person must compete or risk losing their magic. Who is this new champion, Albus?" Dumbledore clenched his fist a bit tighter. "Are you sure they must compete? Is there no way to release them from this obligation? You know the rules as well as I do," Crouch said firmly. The new champion will need to be contacted and brought here to take part in the tournament. What if they are dead? Dumbledore asked hopefully. Then their name would not have been selected. Dumbledore, you already know all of this. What is going on? Ludo Bagman asked. Ludo was a stout man with a barrel chest and a charming smile. He'd once been a champion Quidditch player in his younger days, and still held a bit of popularity to this day, despite his obvious ego and the dirty little secret. Which wasn't as secret as he thought. Ludo Bagman had a serious gambling problem. The name selected. Dumbledore took a breath before continuing. Was Harry Potter. There was a collective gasp from nearly all of the inhabitants of the room. But he. Cedric Diggory stammered. That's not possible. Crouch took several steps away from Dumbledore. Mon Dieu. Madame Maxine and Fleur Delacour said simultaneously. Both Karkaroff and his school's champion looked rather indifferent at this news. While Ludo Bagman's nearly permanent smile began to fade from his face. Rumors of the child's demise were greatly exaggerated to protect him. Dumbledore sighed. I was one of a very few who knew the boy was alive, and as far as I know, I am the only one who knows his current whereabouts. Which I had wished to keep a secret. But he will need to return here. Crouch said, looking up from the chair he'd stumbled into. He must compete in the tournament for whichever school he attends. But they were not contacted. Karkaroff shouted. It is the Triwizard Tournament. Not the quadruple. This is a flagrant disregard of the rules we all work so hard to agree upon. This fourth school was not present for the negotiations, so why should they be allowed to participate? It is not an entire school. Maxime shouted the Bulgarian headmaster down. It is but one child. One, who if you recall, is now being forced to participate against his will. He did not submit his own name. And Dumbledore said he was not of age. How is he expected to manage against 3 wizards much older and more educated than he? Thank you for your understanding, madam. Dumbledore gave a small bow. Dumbledore. You must bring the boy here immediately so that he can compete. The consequences for him should he not will be dire. He could die from the loss of his core. Crouch said urgently. I still can't believe the boy's alive. Bagman said. We all thought that he'd met his fate along with you-know-who, and now you're saying that he's actually alive? Think of what this will do to the morale of our country, Dumbledore. Dumbledore gave the softest of smiles as he inspected the mysterious scrap of parchment once again. A tense silence filled the small room for a moment, broken when Bagman cleared his throat. Why keep it a secret? Why not let us all know that our savior was alive? Bagman pressed. Dumbledore merely shook his head. Do you not remember how things were then, Ludo? Barty Crouch said tensely. His followers would want vengeance, and not a single one of them was above killing a child. I think it was a smart move. I just wonder when you were going to let everyone know the truth, or if you even planned to. I had hoped that I would never need to. It was better for him to grow up away from the fawning and whispers and whatever else he might have had to endure from our people. To be famous for something he would never be able to recall and to have thousands throwing themselves at him with praise and worship. Would you have chosen differently for the child who was barely able to walk on his own? Barty Crouch shrugged and then after a moment shook his head. He knew the old headmaster had chosen correctly for the boy, and if he'd been in the same position, Barty hoped he would have put the child's needs ahead of his own. Very well, Dumbledore said. His voice sounding much stronger than it had since that last name had emerged from the goblet of fire. As it seems clear that we have no alternative, I shall contact Mr. Potter, and have him join us here to participate in the tournament. It is getting late, and I am sure the champions would like to get back to their fellows, who are no doubt waiting to congratulate them. Dumbledore ushered everyone out. Listening to their conversations, Karkaroff was clearly agitated over the news that a fourth champion would be joining the tournament. He was speaking in rapid Bulgarian to Viktor Krum, the Durmstrang champion. Madame Maxime had been a bit more understanding of the situation, which Dumbledore was most thankful for. He had always gotten on well with the French headmistress. Both Crouch and Bagman were discussing what it meant that Harry Potter, the savior of the wizarding world, was not only alive, but returning from oblivion to compete in the tournament. "Sir." Dumbledore turned to face Cedric, who was still in shock. Dumbledore could only guess what this young man might be feeling. He would have been 3 or 4 when a baby managed to stop the most powerful dark wizard in 100 years. He would have grown up hearing stories about the death and devastation Lord Voldemort wreaked upon their world. And then one day, for no apparent reason, he had sought out a child. A defenseless babe, and had somehow been destroyed, along with the entire Potter family. Only Dumbledore and a very select few knew the truth of what had truly happened that night. "Yes. Mr. Diggory. Is it true? Is Harry Potter really alive? Is he really going to be coming here to Hogwarts?" Cedric asked, looking truly awed by just the thought of it. There was no doubt that, like many children, Cedric would have heard the story of the brave Potter family and the sacrifice they made to save them all from suffering. Dumbledore himself was still puzzled how the story had gotten out in the first place, but it had, and it was one of the most famous stories in wizarding history. It would seem so. But I urge you to not let your imagination get the better of you. He is only a boy, not too different from yourself a few years ago. He will be leaving everything he knows behind, and will likely be quite alone here. He may need a friend. Someone who might understand what he's going through." Cedric nodded his understanding. Harry Potter would most likely need a friend, though Cedric doubted the legendary figure would be lacking for friends. Still, Cedric was willing to try and help out a fellow champion if he could. After all, the tournament was supposed to be about creating bonds of friendship, wasn't it? "Am I allowed to tell anyone?" Dumbledore actually smiled, and patted Cedric on the shoulder. "I think I would be very hard-pressed to prevent this news from getting out." "Yes, Mr. Diggory, you may divulge what you have learned. I will be making a formal announcement at breakfast tomorrow morning. Now, you'd best be getting back to the Hufflepuff common room. It is nearly curfew, and I expect the rest of the Hufflepuffs are waiting to congratulate their champion." Cedric nodded with a smile and headed away. Presumably to celebrate his selection and to let all his housemates know that Harry Potter would be coming to Hogwarts. Dumbledore began the trek to his office, where he would need to begin making arrangements. If he were honest with himself, he should have seen this coming. It was only 3 years ago that the first signs that the Dark Lord was trying to rise to power again. Had it not been for himself and his trusted potions master, then Lord Voldemort would have indeed managed to come back to power. Thankfully, the wards they had set had alerted them to Quirrell's presence near the stone. And they had managed to rob Lord Voldemort of his vessel. The following year had seen the release of Slytherin's great beast. The school had very nearly been closed as student after student was petrified by the basilisk stare. Thankfully no one had died, thanks mostly to the bravery of young Ginevra Weasley coming forward and admitting that it had been she who had opened the Chamber of Secrets. As it turned out, the girl was not at all responsible for her actions, as she had been possessed by the spirit of Tom Riddle, whose spirit resided in Diary, now locked in Dumbledore's office, while he tried to solve its mystery. Young Miss Weasley was doing much better these days thanks to regular visits with the headmaster, and had even led the Gryffindor house to a great Quidditch victory the previous year. But this was truly troubling. How did anyone know that young Harry Potter was alive? Were they simply taking a chance, hoping that it paid off, or did whoever behind the scheme actually know Harry was alive? And what was the purpose of entering him in the tournament? Dumbledore remembered the sudden re-emergence of Lord Voldemort's faithful followers at the Quidditch World Cup this past summer. Was it coincidence, or was something far more fiendish in the works? As optimistic as Dumbledore could be, he felt that he was most likely correct in assuming the worst. Unfortunately, there was only one way to learn of the plot. And that was to bring Harry Potter out of seclusion and back to his home country. In truth, he was rather excited to meet the young man himself. He had of course received reports on the boy's upbringing. It had been a part of the agreement he had with Sirius Black, the boy's godfather. Dumbledore remembered the last time he had actually seen the child. That night in the ruins of the house. He had arrived shortly after the alarms in his office told him that the wards had been breached on the Potter home. The house was barely standing, and there were small fires about. Dumbledore quickly extinguished them as he progressed deeper into the ruin. His eyes stung when he came across the body of James Potter near the door. It was clear he tried to protect his wife and child, but had not succeeded. Dumbledore hoped that the Dark Lord had been quick with his sentence. His old heart leapt into his throat when he heard the wailing of the child coming from upstairs. Taking care as he climbed the staircase, the next thing he saw gave him pause, as it had been the last thing he expected to see. Lying as if thrown very violently from a great distance, lay the ruined, mangled and bloody body of Lord Voldemort. His deep red eyes opened wide in a look of purest surprise. Dumbledore stepped over his body and followed the sounds of crying into what had been the nursery. There, upon the floor in front of the child's crib, was Lily Potter. She had placed herself between the Dark Lord and her only child. And then, standing in his crib, blood caked on his little face which was contorted with his grief, or anger, was baby Harry Potter. His chubby little arms reaching for his mother desperately. James. Lily. Dumbledore lifted the crying babe, recognizing the voice of Sirius Black. The man who had been the secret keeper to the Potters, the only one who could have given away their hiding place. Dumbledore pulled his wand and prepared to deal with the traitor. Dumbledore found Sirius sobbing over the body of James Potter. "Are you pleased with your handiwork?" Dumbledore said accusingly. Sirius looked up and suddenly Dumbledore was conflicted. This was not the face of a man who had just betrayed his lifelong friend. Though he had no proof that it was not Sirius who had divulged the secret to the Dark Lord. "I wonder what it was that the Dark Lord bestowed upon you as a reward for your betrayal," Dumbledore said scathingly. "It was Peter," Sirius said through his grief. Tears spilled down the man's cheeks as he looked up at the leader of the light, not really surprised that it had been Dumbledore to arrive first. "I'm going to find that rat and kill him myself." "Peter." Dumbledore's wand fell to his side. "Peter Pettigrew. But you were the secret keeper." The old man eyed the younger one, who was getting to his feet, his grief being replaced by outrage. "We switched. I felt it would have been obvious that I would be the secret keeper. Lily didn't want to put me in that kind of danger. Both James and I knew I'd be targeted anyway. This way, they'd get nothing from me. I convinced James to use Peter. I figured no one would even bother thinking of Peter. The man can barely transfigure a teacup." Sirius broke down once again. Dumbledore couldn't believe what he'd just learned. It hadn't been Sirius who had betrayed them all, but Peter Pettigrew. The young man everyone seemed to believe incapable of deceit. He looked at Sirius, who was still staring at the body of his best friend, his brother in all but blood. Sirius looked as if he was steeling himself to go seeking his own vengeance. It was then that the idea popped into Dumbledore's mind. He had a chance to save more than just one person on this night. "Sirius, there is something far more important you must do. Lord Voldemort is dead." Sirius looked up at Dumbledore. "What?" He asked incredulously. Are you joking? I assure you that I am not. I have seen his body myself. Go up the stairs if you wish. But I tell you, he is dead. But more important, your godson is alive. Dumbledore held out his arm a bit where Harry lay, now still, contented to be held by someone. Sirius came at once to the old man's side, and took Harry into his arms. The baby smiled as he recognized Sirius. Sirius held the child closely, tears of happiness falling from his eyes now. He must be protected, Sirius. Lord Voldemort's followers will be looking for revenge. You must take him far away from here, and raise him as James and Lily would have. He must be kept safe, for I fear that this war is not truly over. What are you talking about? Sirius looked at the headmaster's words. If the bastard's dead, then why shouldn't the war be over? Lord Voldemort delved deeper into the dark arts than anyone witch or wizard before him. While trying to find a way to defeat him, I learned many of the things he researched, and now I believe that he may have somehow secured himself to this world, and one day might return and attempt to bring our world under his control once again. If that is true, Harry Potter may be the only person capable of saving us all. This isn't funny, Albus. Sirius said sternly. As you can clearly see, I am not laughing. I know that James told you the real reason he and Lily were forced to go into hiding. Did they ever tell you why? Sirius shook his head, trying to wipe his tears, while holding onto the sleeping babe. I think they wanted to tell me, but I think they felt the less I knew, the better for me. They did tell me Snape had warned you to protect them. He did indeed. Dumbledore nodded. He thought only of saving Lily and her son. Despite everything, all the torment your four put him through, he still tried to save his greatest rival's child. He tried to do what was right. Then I owe him more than I can ever repay. Sirius sighed, tightening the thin blanket around Harry a bit more securely. Sirius, I want you to take Harry and flee the country. Tell no one where you are except me, so that I may contact you should any emergency arise. Protect his identity at all costs. One day he'll want answers. What do I tell him? Sirius nodded towards the boy in his arms, who was now beginning to yawn. I leave that to you. Dumbledore said sagely. But remember this boy deserves to have as normal a life as can be afforded. I have a dreadful belief that he has just taken his first step on the path that fate has been laying before him. Sirius nodded, and gathered his coat around the child. I'll be in touch, he said before mounting a large motorcycle. Several loud pops sounded, and both men turned towards the sound. Go! Dumbledore urged, and Sirius kicked the motorbike into gear, and tore off into the night. Dumbledore watched in amazement as the motorcycle rose into the air and disappeared behind the clouds. Dumbledore saw the approaching shadows. He saw that they were Aurors led by Barty Crouch. Dumbledore strode to meet them. In a few hours, word would spread about the defeat of the Dark Lord, and the child savior, Harry Potter, the boy who lived. He cringed ever so slightly, hoping that moniker didn't come back to haunt him in the future. Sirius had done as he had been ordered, and wrote the old headmaster, keeping him up to date on the goings-on in Harry's life. When the boy turned 11, a serious decision had to be made. Whether it was time for the boy to return to England and attend Hogwarts, or stay away and attend another institute of magical learning. It was ultimately decided that it might be best for the boy to be educated abroad, as he would not be well known, and could in fact be an average young wizard in training. Sirius had cultivated a new identity for the boy and registered him at the Salem Academy in America, and according to the yearly reports, was doing quite well in all subjects, especially charms, defensive magics, and transfiguration. It appeared that he would be in the top of his class by his 7th year. But it seemed that fate had other plans for the young man. And an echo of a prophecy made at a private meeting so many years ago repeated itself in Dumbledore's mind. The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord will be born as the 7th month. Dies. With a great sigh, Dumbledore knelt before his fireplace and cast a handful of Floo powder into the merrily crackling flames. He was not looking forward to this, but it had to be done. He did not want Harry to lose his magic, especially if his suspicions were correct. Harry still had a part to play in the war, though what it was still unclear. Salem Academy of Magic, Headmistress Blaylock's office. There was a long pause as the Floo connection was made. Dumbledore hadn't expected it to be instant, as connections across the ocean sometimes took a good deal of time. Finally, a rather tired-looking woman, much younger than Dumbledore, her auburn hair quite wild as it was clear that she had just been awoken. "Albus Dumbledore?" the woman asked. Her voice scratchy and hoarse. She was a thin woman with silver grey hair and a very pointed chin and sharp brown eyes. "I am deeply sorry for disturbing you at this hour, but I have something rather important to discuss with you. And it cannot wait, I'm afraid." "Of course. It has been a rather long time since we spoke last. How may I help you?" Dumbledore went on to explain about the Triwizard Tournament, which had not been held in a very long time. Headmistress Blaylock's eyes widened a bit at this news, but her shock over that news was nothing compared to the news that one of her students' names had emerged from the Goblet of Fire. The American headmistress wished to know how it was possible, to which Dumbledore could only shrug. Making him look quite like the fool that so many of his political enemies often likened him to. Needless to say, this student will need to come to Scotland to compete, or suffer great consequences. Dumbledore sighed. "Why do I get the feeling that we're talking about James Black?" Headmistress Blaylock asked, pinching the bridge of her nose. "However did you guess?" Dumbledore asked, a smirk twitching his mouth. "Maybe it's the fact that you've checked up on him twice a year for 3 years. Not to mention it was you who personally met with me about admitting him before his first year. Despite what some might think, I'm no idiot." Dumbledore began to laugh along with his American counterpart. "Well, I'm afraid he's not in school at the moment," Headmistress Blaylock said when she got herself under control. "We've only just started our autumn break. The students aren't scheduled to return for 2 more weeks." "I see." Dumbledore nodded. "Very well, I shall have to contact him directly. I should warn you that young Mr. Black may not return to your fine institution. I had already been considering bringing him back to attend Hogwarts before this little incident. Now it seems I have no choice. Though, while he's competing in our tournament, he will still be representing your school. I can think of very few better choices. If I can help him in any way, please let me know. He will be sorely missed by many here. I am sure of that." Dumbledore smiled. "Thank you, Headmistress." Dumbledore pulled his head out of the green flames, and brushed the soot out of his beard. Rising to his feet, Dumbledore heaved a great sigh. Dumbledore had hoped that he would be able to bring Harry here through the Floo and have the boy there by breakfast, but it appeared that fate had other ideas. It was clear that Dumbledore was about to go visit the United States. Well, at least the students would have something to look forward to. There was no doubt that by breakfast, the whole school would know that Harry Potter was alive, and he was returning to Hogwarts. "Why can't we just fly brooms?" the black-haired, green-eyed 14-year-old asked as he double-checked his helmet. He stood close to the edge of the cliff, admiring the rather breathtaking sight of the desert below. because there are a ton of muggles around. Sirius Black, a tall man with shoulder-length black hair and a well-trimmed goatee, grinned as he checked the rigging. 2. Because this is going to be just as fun as a broom, and it's less dangerous. And 3, it's going to be amazing up there. You speed along on that broom of yours, you never slow down and appreciate the beauty of the world. I do too. The boy snapped. I just want to know why every time we go on vacation, we end up doing these adrenaline adventure things. We almost died on that bridge a few months ago, remember? That's your recollection. The bungee cords were quite secure. Besides, as I recall, you did it 4 times, Harry. Harry Potter grimaced as he remembered that he had in fact really enjoyed bungee jumping. In fact, as much as he complained, he always did enjoy all the cool stuff he and his godfather had done over the years. Sirius often reminded him that these little adventures helped to remind them what it meant to be alive. Harry didn't think he needed to jump out of an airplane or to scale a sheer cliff face to remind him of that simple fact. Just waking up each morning was enough of a reminder. And so, Harry always complained about whatever stupid thing they were about to do, even though he always enjoyed each and every adventure. Most of them, he usually got really excited about. It had just become a sort of tradition for Harry to object, and Sirius would wonder what was wrong if Harry didn't put up some sort of resistance. Truth was that Harry had truly been looking forward to hang gliding ever since Sirius had mentioned it a few months ago. Once school had let out for autumn break, Sirius had whisked him away to New Mexico for the trip. The fact that it was also a camping trip just added to Harry's enjoyment. Some of Harry's fondest memories were of him and Sirius camping. They'd gone camping in so many different places, that Harry couldn't even name them all. Okay, I think we're ready. Get over here. Sirius waved the boy over. When Harry was close enough, Sirius hooked him into the harness before strapping himself in as well. Together they heft the hang glider up, and with a count of 3, the 2 men sprinted, and with a primal scream from them both, they leapt off the cliff. Harry felt very comfortable in the air. He was a seeker on one of the Quidditch teams at his school, as well as a prominent figure in the broom racing scene, which was a relatively new up-and-coming sport. There was nothing better than soaring at top speed through the air with the wind whipping your face as the earth speed underneath you. But, there was something to be said for cruising slowly through the air and taking in the majesty of the New Mexican desert. It was so quiet and breathtaking that it was hard not to find peace. Harry caught sight of a hawk soaring in the distance, and Harry couldn't help but smile. See, I told you you'd like it. Sirius grinned. I never doubted you. Harry smiled in return, and Sirius returned the smile before allowing the quiet to envelope them again. Sirius kept them in the air as best as he could, being fairly new at the sport himself. He kept them fairly close to the lake where they were camped near, as he doubted Harry would enjoy a 10-mile hike while carrying the hang glider. As they descended lower and lower, Harry felt his heart sink, as he had really enjoyed being in the sky. As they soared over the small lake, Harry reached down hoping to touch the glassy surface. He suddenly realized, however, that they were very close to the water, and it didn't appear the Sirius was going to pull up. Sirius. We're still kind of far from the shore. You can pull up now. I've been trying. I think we're going to get wet. Ah, damn it. Harry sighed. A few seconds later, the 2 crashed into the lake. Sirius was able to disconnect them both from the harness. Harry swam out from under the glider with Sirius right behind him. They broke the surface of the lake, spluttering and coughing. Not bad for our first time, Sirius commented. Yeah. Harry responded cheerily. At least we didn't just dive bomb into the canyon. Cheeky blighter. Sirius smirked, splashing his godson. Sirius tried to evade his godson, who splashed him in retaliation. All right, all right. Sirius held up his hands in surrender. Let's get to shore and make sure no one's around, then I'll get this thing back to camp. Then we can eat? Harry asked eagerly. Yes, then we can eat. Come on, cub. They swam a short distance before the lake began to shallow, and they could walk the rest of the way. Sirius grabbed Harry into a one-armed hug and they trudged clumsily through the water. A very interesting-looking device. I dare say with a bit of practice, you might keep it in the air indefinitely. Both Harry and Sirius looked up at the source of the voice, and Harry felt his godfather stiffen. The man was very obviously a wizard. There was no way he could be with those soft blue robes covered in moons and stars. The pointed hat, or the impossibly long snowy white hair and beard. He wore half-moon spectacles, and had a long thin crooked nose. Sirius Black, it has been a very long time. I'm very happy to see you again. And you, the man said, now turning his attention to Harry. You have grown into quite the young man, Harry. Thanks. Sirius relaxed slightly, but he still stepped in front of Harry, shielding him a bit before pulling out his wand and aiming it at the newcomer. The last night we saw each other, what was it you said to me? I said many things that night, but I stressed how very important it was that Harry must be kept safe as he was the only one who was capable of saving us all. The man smiled, his light blue eyes twinkling in the setting sun. Sirius slowly lowered his wand and stared at the man. How did you find us? It wasn't easy. You cover your tracks well. Using Muggle transport instead of Port-Kayet. Very smart. My compliments. The less magic I do, the harder I am to track, I figured. Very wise. Perhaps we should allow you both to get out of the lake, and maybe have some dinner. We have a great deal to discuss. Harry followed his godfather, a very puzzled expression on his face. Once he was on the shore he got a good look at the rather old-looking wizard, who was smiling brilliantly at him, obviously pleased to see the boy. Though Harry was quite sure he'd never met the man in his life. Still, he seemed familiar, and for some reason, Harry felt he could almost trust this man. Harry, I'm so sorry. Sirius said, turning to his godson. This is Albus Dumbledore. You're Dumbledore. Harry's eyes lit up with recognition. He'd heard many stories about the great Albus Dumbledore from Sirius. He'd been told that it was Dumbledore who helped Sirius get him away from the house where his parents had died, and who had been helping them through the years. Harry had often wondered about the man who had taught not only his godfather, but his mother and father as well. It's an honor, sir. No, I believe the honor to be mine, Harry. If I may call you Harry. Oh, yes sir. Sirius urged them to hurry along and soon Harry had changed out of his wet clothes and was sitting in front of a small fire while Sirius threw some steaks onto a grill as well as a couple of cobs of corn while Dumbledore conjured a rather comfortable-looking chair to sit in. You never answered my question, Albus. Sirius said without looking at the old man. How'd you find us? I went to your house in Salem. Headmistress Blaylock informed me that the autumn break had just begun, and I hoped to catch you there. I was clearly too late. However, I did see a few notes regarding camping and hang gliding adventures in New Mexico. I felt it would be wise to at least take a look. I knew I forgot to burn those notes. Sirius chided. I doubt anyone else would have thought much of it. Try not to beat yourself up too much. Dumbledore smiled lightly. This is a very beautiful area. I must admit I have never had the opportunity to visit America. I am quite impressed. Sir, if I may ask, why have you come? I mean, I'm really excited to meet you, but I kind of thought that. Well, Harry asked, looking nervously from Dumbledore to Sirius, both who looked rather grave. How much do you know of what led to you living with Sirius? Dumbledore countered Harry's question. Everything, I think. My parents went into hiding from Voldemort because he'd threatened to kill me. They trusted the wrong person, and Wormtail betrayed their location. Voldemort killed them, and that you found me right before Sirius showed up, and you asked him to hide me. You've hidden nothing from him. Dumbledore looked to Sirius, who stared defiantly back at the old headmaster. I swore that I'd never hide anything from him. I've always been honest with him whenever he asked me anything. When it was time for him to attend school, he wanted to go to Hogwarts like his parents and me, but I explained that we felt it wasn't safe. I see. Dumbledore smiled softly. Well, it seems that fate has other ideas for us. This year, Hogwarts is hosting the Triwizard Tournament. Really? Sirius sat up a bit straighter. I thought it was banned after so many people died. It had been, but certain people felt that the time was right to bring it back. Better safety precautions have been established, an age requirement of 17 was implemented. What does this have to do with Harry? Sirius cocked an eyebrow. Harry's name emerged from the Goblet of Fire. I have come to bring him back to Hogwarts so he may compete. There was a long pause while Dumbledore's words sank in. It was Harry who found his voice first. How is that possible? Harry asked, looking quite confused. It was my understanding that everyone believed I was dead. That is just one of the major questions we have been unable to answer. Dumbledore smiled. Perhaps you should turn those stakes. Sirius shook himself and went to tending their supper before it became little more than ash. He and Harry listened attentively as Dumbledore explained how Harry's name had emerged from the Goblet of Fire and the resulting discussion between the headmasters and someone named Bartimus Crouch and Ludo Bagman. Dumbledore did his best to make both Harry and Sirius understand that this was not how he had hoped to reintroduce Harry to his homeland, but that there was very little choice. So, even though I didn't enter myself, I still have to compete in this thing or risk losing my magic. This is ridiculous, Albus. He's not ready for anything like this. Hey. Harry said, looking a bit dejected. Harry, I've seen you do some really great stuff, and you've worked really hard in school, but you are only 14, and have yet to learn much of what you'll need for this tournament. I know that you are capable, but you're still untrained, for lack of a better word. Sirius said, hoping to placate his godson. Harry simply glared at his godfather. Sirius is right. Dumbledore smiled. What is being planned is going to be quite difficult, and not to insult you, but it is unlikely that you would truly be able to perform adequately enough. Still, we have no alternative. I have tried to find some sort of way to get you out of this predicament without losing your magic. Unfortunately, the power of the Goblet of Fire is quite binding. I have already explained our predicament to your headmistress and arrangements are being made for your return. I'm going to Hogwarts. Harry asked excitedly. I'm really going to see Hogwarts, and walk through the halls. And attend the classes, yes. Dumbledore smiled at the boy's excitement. Clearly the boy wished to attend the school where his mother and father had met, been educated, and fell in love. Given how the boy's life had turned out, Dumbledore could not blame him. So, he'll be attending Hogwarts this year? Sirius asked, still rather confused on how this had all happened. His sole concern was for Harry's safety. Yes, though he will still be registered as a student of Salem Academy of Magic, he will attend classes at Hogwarts. Perhaps, after this year is finished we may enroll him into Hogwarts properly, if that is Harry's wish. Dumbledore said with a grin at the teen's faraway look. And what about the tournament? How's he supposed to get through it? Dumbledore's grin faded almost at once and he turned to Sirius, who was now pulling the steaks and corn cobs off the fire, and Harry stood to get plates and utensils. There was silence for a few minutes as Sirius dished up food and Harry passed a plate to Dumbledore before taking his own and returning to his spot in front of the fire. The rules are quite clear that the champions cannot ask for help from teachers or any one of the judges. However, there is no rule that says that the champions cannot seek help from one another, or other students. Perhaps young Harry will be able to make new friends and they might offer assistance. There is more than a few young people with very bright minds who might prove to be helpful. I happen to know that the Hogwarts champion, Cedric Diggory, is most anxious to make your acquaintance. He will, I think, prove a most valuable companion. So Sirius can't help me? Harry began. Dumbledore shook his head. Not officially. Harry missed a look that passed between the two adults, but did see that Sirius relaxed quite a bit. But I can get help from other students. The champions, which include you, shall not know of the nature of each task until the moment they are expected to begin. So, there is nothing stopping a champion from research and perfecting their performance of spell work. The Hogwarts library brimming with books just full of incredible magic, as I am sure your godfather can tell you, as he and his school chums learned more on their own than they did in classes. Harry grinned at Sirius, who was also smiling lightly, remembering many hours spent researching spells, charms, and potions that he and his friends could use to cause all sorts of chaos in school. Will I be sorted? Harry asked. No. Not while you are still enrolled at Salem Academy. Though, if at the end of the year if you decide you would like to keep on at Hogwarts, then you will be sorted. Dumbledore smiled as he shook his head. Harry seemed to deflate for a second. So where will he be staying then? Sirius asked. Harry will have his own private room, with an attached bathroom. Dumbledore explained. Sounds pretty great, but what about his protection? Once the country knows that he's not only alive, but at Hogwarts, what's to stop any of Voldemort's followers from trying to kill him? Sirius asked. Dumbledore gave a sad smile. Need I remind you that there is hardly any safer place in all of Great Britain safer for someone to be than at Hogwarts? Though I must say there is little reason to worry about, as nearly every one of Lord Voldemort's followers have gone to ground. Don't try condescending me. Remus told me all about that mess at the World Cup. You still correspond with Remus Lupin? Dumbledore sounded surprised. My only living friend? Of course. I've never told him where I was, but we've written often over the years. I've been kept appraised of the situation while he's been hunting down Peter. Ah, that explains a lot. Dumbledore nodded, and smiled. That was why he so readily took the job as defense teacher last year. We thought that Peter might be hiding in the castle as a rat. He'd have plenty of food, and loads of hiding places. So I sent Remus the map, and the last word was that he had very nearly caught the swine. So, the traitor was right under our noses the whole time? Dumbledore asked, looking quite upset that he'd not been informed of this. No, as it turns out he was living with the Weasley family. Remus said that Peter's name didn't appear on the map until the students arrived. That was why he came so quickly to Hogwarts. He was hoping to catch your former friend before school started. That was our plan. Once the students were there, it was harder for Remus to catch the bastard, but he finally nearly had him before Christmas. Remus lost him in the forest. Sirius explained, and both men looked upset, though for very different reasons. And what about Snape? Sirius asked, changing topics. Remus told me that you've been letting that murderer teach all these years. You know how he felt about Harry's family. You know that he all but swore that he'd see James dead. You're going to let that coward teach children? Teach Harry? That's just asking for trouble. Severus sacrificed more than anyone at the end of the war. He turned spy for our side. If not for Severus, we might not have been able to save the Longbottoms. I am sure that he has outgrown such pettiness as a schoolboy rivalry. Sirius arched an eyebrow at Dumbledore, but chose not to respond. He decided it would be better just to prepare Harry for anything Snape might throw at him. Remus had made it quite clear that Snape had changed very little over the years. Sirius hated to think of what he might try to pull on Harry given that he was a nearly mirror image of his father. I have only one more question, Professor. Harry said, leaning forward. The light from the fire made his young boyish face look almost devilish. What are the girls like? Sirius roared with laughter and rolled onto his back, holding his sides. Dumbledore also chuckled mildly at the young man's query. Harry Potter may be the only person who could save them from a future that Dumbledore himself prayed would never happen, but he was also a 14-year-old boy. Of course the only thing on his mind would be the fairer sex. For the next few hours, Dumbledore gave Harry an in-depth history of the Triwizard Tournament. He pointed out certain rules that had been placed on the current tournament to hopefully prevent the champions from being permanently hurt. Harry tried several times to get Dumbledore to tell him what tasks were planned for the tournament, but the old headmaster was very evasive on that subject. Finally, Sirius told Harry to get to bed as they had a lot to do in the morning to prepare for their move to Hogsmeade. Harry reluctantly rose, and bade the two men good night. As he lay down in the tent, Harry's mind was supercharged with anticipation. As he closed his eyes, he imagined a grand castle filled with secret chambers and hidden passages where he and some nameless girl, who strangely enough looked like a girl he'd been crushing on at his own school, could hide away to make out. So what do you think is going on? Sirius asked after an hour when he was sure Harry was now asleep. Dumbledore looked pensive for a moment. Sirius had no illusions about Dumbledore showing up all of a sudden. He at least suspected more than he'd been saying so far. Sirius had always hated the way Dumbledore tried to handle everything on his own. Secrets got people killed, and barely anyone knew that better than Sirius Black. Don't you dare try keeping this to yourself. You better start telling me what the hell is happening. I suspect that Lord Voldemort has sent one of his followers, perhaps Peter himself, to place Harry's name in the Goblet of Fire. I believe there might be a connection between Harry and Lord Voldemort. Tell me, has Harry ever had pain associated with his scar? A few times in the last 3 years. Although. Sirius paused. Dumbledore looked pointedly at the other man, waiting for Sirius to go on. He woke up at school from a nightmare a few weeks ago. Sirius said worriedly. He said the dream was incredibly real to him. A voice talking to two men that he didn't know, but from the description Harry gave, I think one of them was Wormtail. He mentioned something about a tournament. That's all I remember. Interesting. Dumbledore said, leaning back in his conjure chair. Did he describe the second man? No, Harry said he couldn't see him very well. He said they were talking to someone in a high-backed chair, and he saw someone killed. A muggle. Harry was quite sure that they were planning something, but he was so freaked out, that he wasn't really sure what. How often has this happened, these nightmares? First time that I can recall. He wrote me straight away when he awoke, but it didn't seem that important to me. He had a few headaches during his first year. He claimed they were centered around his scar, but neither of us thought it was anything more than stress. They went away after his first year. His first year, you say? Dumbledore leaned forward, his hand stroking his long white beard. Yeah, why? What happened? Lord Voldemort possessed our defense against the dark arts teacher that year. He was seeking the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's? But I thought it was a myth. Sirius looked shocked. Oh no. It was quite real. It was given to me by Nicholas Flamel to be destroyed, while he put his affairs in order. He felt it was long past time to make his leave of this world. I had heard rumors of things that made me believe that Lord Voldemort was at last gaining power once again. By themselves, these incidents were trivial, meaningless. But together. How did he manage to hide from you? How long was he in the school? To be honest, no one had any reason to suspect Professor Quirrell. He had returned from a sabbatical a little more skittish than he had been before, but there were rumors of a breakdown. He was still quite a teacher. However, Severus noticed strange mannerisms that reminded him of his former master. It was decided to set up a trap. Myself and the other teachers prepared a series of obstacles to lure Quirrell to the stone even though it had already been destroyed. Severus and I ended up killing him. It was then that we learned the horrible truth that Lord Voldemort had been possessing the man. Remus mentioned you had some trouble the year before he started, but I had no idea. Sirius began, but Dumbledore chuckled. I believe Remus was referring to the reopening of the Chamber of Secrets. A diary found its way into the hands of a young girl. The diary was something sinister, and the young girl had become possessed. Fortunately, the girl found the courage to come to me and admit that she was behind the trouble. No one was seriously hurt, only 3 petrifications, and we were able to heal them all. What was in the chamber? Sirius asked, but Dumbledore shrugged. It was never reopened, and the poor girl could not remember what the creature might be. Dumbledore sighed. We don't even know where the chamber is. Silence fell over them again, disturbed only by the choir of cicadas and the crackle of the fire. So how are you planning to protect Harry? Sirius finally asked. There is little I can do. The tournament has a great number of risks that every... Not from the tournament. Sirius corrected. Wormtail can obviously sneak into the castle whenever he wants. What's to stop him from getting inside and making off with Harry, or worse, killing him in his sleep? I do not believe that Harry will be harmed. I suspect there is something greater being planned for him. Why put him in the tournament otherwise? No, I fear there is something else being arranged. I only hope that I can figure out what it is before it's too late. I'm coming. Sirius said softly but with determination. I'll get a house in Hogsmeade so I'm close if I'm needed. I have already arranged a suitable house for you both. Everything has been taken care of. Since Harry will be in school, I hope that you might help me by trying to discover where your former friend is hiding. Between you and Remus Lupin, I have great faith that you might locate him, and we can stop whatever plot he and his associates are staging. Sounds like fun. Sirius grinned maniacally. I think it is time that we both get some rest. We have much to do tomorrow so that Harry may start school on Monday. For once, I don't think he's going to be upset that we're cutting his vacation short. Sirius chuckled, knowing Harry's enthusiasm to actually go to the same school as his parents. By Sunday evening, the entirety of Hogwarts was abuzz with anticipation of the new arrival. Cedric had of course told his housemates that the legendary Harry Potter was not only alive, but returning to Hogwarts to compete. This news had spread over the weekend. When Dumbledore arrived back at the castle late that night, he was met by a few of his teachers who had not been privy to the conversation after the champion selection Friday evening. He had left quite early the day before, and had only left a letter for his deputy headmistress, informing her that he would return the next evening. "Albus, is it true?" Minerva McGonagall asked, leading the other faculty members. "The students are all talking about Harry Potter coming to Hogwarts." Dumbledore smiled at his friend and then turned to look at the other teachers in turn. "A formal announcement will be made tomorrow morning, and young Mr. Potter will be here in time for dinner tomorrow evening where he will be introduced to the school." "My gods!" squeaked Phileas Flitwick, the diminutive charms professor. "We all thought he was dead. I mean, his body was never found." "Did you know?" "Yes, I knew." Dumbledore sighed, leading the teachers into the castle. "I've corresponded with his godfather over the years, and was kept abreast of their movements." "But why now?" Pomona Sprout asked curiously. "Why didn't he come here sooner?" "Safety." Dumbledore sighed again. He was tired after all the travel and the other business he'd done that day. He desperately wished to get something to eat and go to bed. It was discussed at great length, and it was decided for Harry's own safety, he should attend school elsewhere. Somewhere he was not famous for doing something that he could not only not remember, but would have no way to explain to anyone. It was best to give him as normal a childhood as possible. However, those plans were torn asunder when Mr. Potter's name emerged from the Goblet of Fire. "He's to compete?" McGonagall asked in sudden shock. The other teachers all stopped suddenly at this revelation. "That's what all that commotion was about," Flitwick said, snapping his fingers. "After the Goblet of Fire ceremony, you and the other judges stated arguing." "It wasn't an argument, although Karkaroff thinks we deceived him somehow," Dumbledore explained. "Mr. Potter's name was entered under a fourth school. As such, he will be representing his own school for the tournament." "Wait a minute." Sprout waved her hands in front of her, as if waving away smoke. "How can the boy compete? If memory serves me correctly, he isn't 17 yet." "That is correct, yet, he must compete. His name emerging from the goblet constitutes a binding magical contract. Harry Potter must compete, or lose his magic. Now, I'm afraid I must get some rest. We will speak more about this tomorrow. Good night." They had arrived at the gargoyle which guarded the headmaster's office, and subsequently, his living quarters as well. Dumbledore bade them all a pleasant evening and went to his office. He was quite surprised to find Severus Snape awaiting him there. "Severus, I am very tired. Can this wait until morning?" 13 years, and you never once thought to tell me Lily Evans' son was alive," Snape hissed. He glared at the headmaster through a curtain of long greasy black hair. "Would it have changed anything?" Dumbledore asked, slipping off his traveling cloak. "Would you have been able to let go of your hatred of James Potter, or his friends, and lived a good life? Would the knowledge that the child survived made you try to be a better man? Tell me, what would that knowledge have changed in you?" "Does he?" Snape began, looking away from the headmaster. "Does he look like her?" "Only in the eyes. Otherwise, he is the spitting image of James Potter." Snape hissed. "Wonderful. It'll be like Potter has returned from the great beyond, mocking me at every turn." "Are you so certain? Perhaps he has more of his mother in him than his father. You simply cannot judge the boy before getting to know him. In fact, I would think, given what his teachers at Salem Academy say about him, you might even find him engaging. He has received top marks in his transfiguration, charms, defense and potions work over the last 3 years? Snape seemed to bristle at this information, and turned back to Dumbledore. Where has he been all this time? Who was taking care of him? Are you concerned about his well-being because you wish it was you I entrusted to care for him? Certainly not. Then why ask me about his upbringing at all? Just tell me. Dumbledore sighed, knowing full well what was about to happen. Bracing himself for the explosion, he looked his potions teacher in the eye. Sirius Black was taking care of him. He is the boy's godfather after all. Are you out of your ever-loving mind? Snape roared. What could you have possibly been thinking? Black. The most irresponsible, immature, self-centered man to ever have walked this earth, and you let him run off with Lily's child. Severus. Dumbledore shouted the man down. There is simply nothing you can do to change things, so ranting like a lunatic will not help. I am tired, and have been traveling most of the day. I would like to rest. Tomorrow, you will be introduced to the boy along with the rest of his school. For now, I suggest you continue with your duties. Dumbledore motioned for the door, and Snape just stared coldly back. After a moment, Snape's shoulders sagged a bit and he left, muttering under his breath. Exhaustion settled onto the headmaster, and he sighed for the millionth time. There is no doubt about it, he contemplated. This is going to be a very interesting year. The flood flared green and bright and a man with graying sandy blonde hair stepped out into the small cottage. He was immediately gathered up in a bone-crushing hug from a man he'd not laid eyes on in 13 years. Remus, it is so good to see you again, my friend. Remus Lupin held tightly onto the last living marauder, at least in his mind. Sure, Peter was still alive, but as far as the two men holding tightly to one another now, he was dead to them. The years have been most kind to you. Remus chuckled, messing Sirius' hair a bit. And to you. Sirius replied, leading his friend to the kitchen for a drink. Found a hot young witch to uncage your inner wolf. Oh, ha. I see that parenting has not matured you in the least. Remus replied with a wry smile as he sat down. Speaking of which, where is he? Unpacking. He's rather confused and a little nervous. I expect. What happened anyway? I was sure you weren't going to return until after Harry graduated Salem Academy. Sirius went into a long explanation about how Dumbledore had found them, and all he knew of Harry's name suddenly emerging from the goblet of fire. As well as all the suspicions the old man had shared regarding its purpose. Remus listened closely, waiting to ask his questions when Sirius finished. Before he could, however, a slender-built teen with messy black hair entered the kitchen. Harry, I'd very much like you to meet Remus Lupin. Sirius said, introducing the ragged-looking man sitting at their table. Moony? Harry asked, his slightly tired-looking eyes opening wide in delight. Oh, this is so cool. Harry said, reaching for the man's hand. I have so many questions to ask. Calm down, Harry. Sirius laughed. Remus isn't going anywhere just yet. It is truly an honor to see you again after all this time. Remus smiled cheerfully. Harry smiled and took a seat at the table, grabbing a bottle of butterbeer on his way. So you're going to compete in the Triwizard Tournament? Remus asked, a look of worry crossing his face. I suppose I have no choice. Harry sighed. Dumbledore said since my name came out, I had little choice. I'm more interested in how your name got in that cup to begin with. Sirius grimaced. You think it was Wormtail? Remus asked, and Sirius nodded. He knows the castle, and with his rat form, it would be quite easy for him to slip into the castle and slip out again unnoticed. Maybe, maybe not. Dumbledore has moody teaching defense this year. You know how paranoid that man is. There's rumor that he has ways to tell if animagi are around. I don't know if it's true or not, but I rather think whatever he might have set up goes crazy whenever McGonagall does her demonstrations. Sirius laughed at that, remembering fondly that it was McGonagall's demonstration that had led to himself, Wormtail, and Harry's father to try and become animagi themselves. He also knew Alastor Moody, having worked with him shortly before the war came to an end 13 years ago, and the man had been, well, paranoid was the nicest way of putting it. Speaking of Hogwarts, I brought this. Remus smiled, pulling a folded piece of parchment out of his pocket. Sirius' eyes lit up at once as he took it and examined it fondly, before turning and handing it to his godson. I think you have the most use for this. Harry took the parchment, and looked at it strangely. What is it? That, my boy, is the key to the castle. Nearly every secret passage, hidden room, and the location of every single person at any given time. That is the Marauder's map. No way! Harry exclaimed, opening the parchment in excitement and then frowning when he saw that it was blank. Is this another lame joke? Perhaps you should tell him how to activate it? Remus grinned at the boy's indignance. I guess so. Sirius smiled. He slipped his wand out of his wrist holster and tapped the map. I solemnly swear that I am up to no good. At once, the map appeared and showed Harry the glory of the castle he was about to enter. There before him was every level of the ancient fortress, and hundreds of names upon moving dots. He saw that Dumbledore was in his office, while someone named Filch was chasing after two names, Dean Thomas and Parvati Patil. Professor McGonagall was walking along a corridor on the second floor and Professor Vector was standing very close to Professor Babbling. This is so cool. Harry grinned. Just remember to deactivate it when you're done. Remus said, taping his own wand to the parchment. Mischief managed. Thank you. This is going to come in so handy. Harry grinned. Harry's planning on snogging every single girl he possibly can this year. Sirius remarked, causing Harry to blush slightly. Course it won't be too terribly different from his own school. Last year I got several letters from the headmistress about him exploring broom closets. That was totally innocent. Harry protested, but Sirius merely grinned, and Harry caved a bit. Well, most of it was. Well, just be careful. Remus warned. Try not to let girls make you forget what you need to focus on. Along with classes, you need to prepare for the tournament as much as you can. But I don't even know where to begin. Harry sighed, folding the map up again. I don't even know what the tasks are, and as much as I tried, Dumbledore wouldn't tell me a thing. I mean, I shouldn't even be in this stupid thing. Harry sighed, ruffling his own hair. I just noticed something. I figured Harry would have had James' vision issues. Remus said suddenly. Sirius grinned, and nodded. He did. So why's he not wearing glasses? Laser surgery. Harry smiled. Laser what now? Remus looked between the two men in confusion. Really, Remus, are you living in the Dark Ages? The Muggles have done things with medicine that are simply amazing. They were able to fix Harry's eyes with a laser. No more glasses sliding off his face when he dueled or flew. Sirius grinned. And the girls love it. They can really see my smoldering eyes. Harry said, sitting back in his seat, grinning like the Cheshire Cat. Here was a pause before Remus and Sirius roared with laughter. He is most definitely James' son. Remus said, gasping for breath, wiping tears out of his eyes. The three talked some more, with Remus sharing a few embarrassing stories about Sirius and a girl in their 5th year. Sirius tried repeatedly to argue that the story had been embellished, but Remus offered to show his memories of the event in question, which promptly quieted Sirius' protests. Finally, Sirius sent Harry off to bed as he was supposed to report to Hogwarts in the morning. Harry asked Remus when they'd meet again, and Remus informed Harry that he would be around as much as possible. Once Harry left for bed, the two old friends caught up on lost time. Talking late into the night about as much that had happened while they'd been apart before Sirius offered his old friend the spare bedroom for the night. Remus took his old friend up on the offer, not wanting to miss seeing Harry off to Hogwarts. Please like and subscribe.